Hey there, this is Claire Urban from Gleaner's Food Bank Cooking Matters program, and today we're going to learn to cut up a whole chicken. This is a great skill set to have in your toolbox because whole chickens generally cost a lot less per pound than the pre-sliced pieces. You can store a lot away in your freezer and it's really great for meal planning. So let's get started. The first thing we have here is our whole chicken. We've already checked to see if the giblets have been removed from the inside, which they were. And I'm going to talk, before we get started cutting this, a little bit about food safety. Cross-contamination, not washing our hands, or putting raw foods on a surface where the germs have been is the #1 way to get foodborne illness. A garbage bowl is a really great thing to have while you're cutting up a chicken, so you don't have to keep returning to the garbage can and possibly cross-contaminating. Many folks like to wash their chickens under running water at home, and it turns out that that is something that could increase the chances of cross-contamination. And so when the water splashes on the chicken, there's potential for it to spread all around the sink. And so the safest thing to do is not wash the chicken, pat it dry, and once we cook it to a proper temperature, that's what's going to kill any of the germs that could potentially get us sick. So before we start cutting into our chicken or even handling it, we want to make sure that we have everything ready and prepared for the butchering of the chicken. I have my chicken here on a cutting board within a sheet pan. I really like to do it this way so that the drippings don't come out. Underneath that, I have a paper towel so the sheet pan doesn't slide. And I also have a paper towel in between the sheet pan and the cutting board. We have where we're going to put the scraps for the chicken, which I'm going to, this is really cool. If you unroll it, or like kind of roll it like you're cupping a sock, you can prop that open like this, and you won't have to be touching the outside of the bag the whole time. Then finally, we have where we're gonna be putting our chicken pieces. And we're gonna be using some paper towel today. I'll let you know why that's so important later on. But I'm gonna go ahead and rip off some pieces that I'll need so I don't have to touch the whole roll while we're butchering this chicken. So this is a boning knife, and a boning knife is a little slimmer than a chef's knife. You can be using a chef's knife as well, but you'll be seeing that we're gonna be getting in between these joints, and so it makes a little more sense to use something that's kind of slim. Beforehand, I made sure my knife was very nice and sharp in order to do this safely. Let's look at the parts of the chicken here. We have 2 wings. We have the 2 legs. The breasts are at the front of the wings. And then this is the backbone right here. We're gonna take the chicken and we're going to flip it on its back. We're gonna use very gentle strokes here. And bit by bit, the skin's gonna pull away. You can feel where the joints are, and you're gonna pull the leg and pop it out. Then, once again, moving away from ourselves, that's where like the thigh ends, and we're gonna go under the thigh meat. You can see where this bone ends. And it'll slice right off. At this point, the paper towels come in handy. The skin contains fat, and particularly the bad kind of fat. So we want to remove that to reduce the fat in our diet, and it becomes very easy when you do it with a paper towel. Then we have our convenient garbage bowl to toss that all in. Slice in very slowly so I can feel where that bone is, and go in between those joints there. And there you have your thigh meat and your drumstick. You're gonna continue this on the other side. We're gonna move on to the wings next. The wings are even easier. You'll just kind of go in, and it should come off pretty effortlessly. Finally, we're gonna remove the skin off of the breast. I like to, going away from myself, kind of cut in between where the breasts meet the back, and then crack it open to once again have kind of a kickstand. And so the rest of the chicken, there's kind of this white line down the middle, and you can even feel like the bones here. There's the wishbone, And you're gonna take your knife and you're going to just bit by bit kind of slice away from that bone. All right, so we have our 2 breast pieces here. And underneath the breast, there's a smaller piece. And this is what is commonly referred to as the tenderloin. And so chicken tenders, originally I think were made of these, but now they're just tender shaped and probably just breast meat. And then we have this bag already opened for us that we can put our back in. We can put this in the freezer and save it for later. And we end up with 2 breast pieces, 2 tenders, 2 drumsticks, 2 wings, and 2 thigh pieces. So now that we've butchered our whole chicken, it's time to make our recipe chicken with apples and raisins. So now that the area is nice and sanitized, we're gonna get to our recipe. We are going to be using 1 onion, it can be any color, 2 apples, 2 large carrots, cinnamon, coriander, and cumin. We also have our salt, our pepper. Our chicken pieces are off to the side, so while we're working with our raw fruits and vegetables, we don't cross-contaminate them. We have our oil on hand by the pan. We're gonna be using reduced sodium chicken broth, which we've rinsed the top of the can off for safety reasons, and then 3/4 of a cup of raisins. So the first thing we're going to do is rinse, peel, and dice our vegetables. I'm gonna start with our onion, and this is a basic cut that y'all should have learned by now. I'm gonna use my claw, and I'm holding the knife on the steel to cut off the top of it, the non-root end. I'm gonna place it on its flat side. Now I'm gonna cut this onion right down the middle. So I have my onion peeled, and I'm going to slice in along the grain of the onion. Now the tip of the knife down on the table, we're slicing forward, and we're making kind of a small to medium dice. Onto the carrots, the recipe calls for them to be peeled, but I just like to give them a real good scrub since they're gonna be cooked down nice and soft anyway. My rule is that I don't like to cut anything that's long as my knife or longer, and so I'm gonna cut these into little logs, and that makes them very easy to split in half and work with. And using my claw, I'm gonna saw. Now we're gonna do our apple, and kind of like the onion, the first thing we wanna do is get a flat surface to it. And now we have our flat planks. We're gonna keep the peel on this, so you wanna kind of consider that in the cooking time, and keep the pieces about the same size as the carrot. So here are our chicken pieces. And to this, we're gonna add the spices, which we're considering our dry rub. So we're going to use 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of coriander, 1 teaspoon of cumin. When it says a 1/2 teaspoon divided, that means we're gonna take that half and turn it into 2 4th teaspoons. So to the chicken, I'm adding a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And finally, we're gonna add in that 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. So we're taking our spices and we're evenly coating the chicken. So our chicken pieces are nice and evenly coated. I'm gonna put those off to the side. And so the final step before we turn the stove on is making sure that we have our mise en place. And so as you may know, mise en place means to put everything in its place. And the reason for that is once we get that stove going, we don't want those small pieces of onion, carrot, apple burning up at all while we're measuring out the spices, while we're cutting up different ingredients. And so we're gonna assemble everything ahead of time, kind of like a checklist. So we have our mise en place to the side, all of our ingredients. And we're gonna turn our pan on and get it nice and hot. To the pan, we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil. We're gonna get these vegetables nice and tender, pull them off to the side to make sure that our meat is browned, and then combine them and add the stock. We're gonna turn off the stove, and we have a bowl nearby. We're gonna get every last piece out, and we're gonna use this pan to cook up the chicken. Turning our stove back on, we're gonna add 1 more tablespoon of our canola oil to the pan. And since the pan is already nice and hot, those chicken pieces should start sizzling as soon as we drop them in. So once it's browned on that side, we're gonna flip every piece over. Once the chicken pieces are browned on both sides, then we're gonna add our vegetable mixture back to the pan. And to that, we're going to add our raisins and our broth. So that's our recipe, chicken apples and raisins. It's great topped with your favorite chopped herbs and nuts. And so I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for joining us.